All right. So we are live,
Thanks, April. Yeah, I'm
but
pleased to say that we're joined this morning by Michael
I
Shapundi,
gotta
CEO of
eat
Anti-Gravity. Well, congratulations on
lunchtime,
launching this new product that you have,
and I gotta go
just talk
empty
us through
out
because
those
obviously the drone market is highly competitive.
those
There's a lot of
vegetables
different
real
products
quick.
on the market as well, but in your opinion, what
Make
makes yours
sure that
different?
we are
Well, from the first moment that we incepted the product, we wanted to do something that nobody else did. And the
because we're
Anti-Gravity
gonna
A1
start
is the
our
world's
finals
first fully
immediately.
integrated 360 drone. That means it captures everything around you,
30%
and you don't need to
battery.
worry about where the
This
camera
needs
is
to
pointing
charge. I need
and
that
where you're
cable,
facing.
man. I
All
gotta
you
buy
do
that
is
cable.
enjoy the flying experience,
All
and
right.
then you can pick your angles and moments later in post. So
So
what that allows you to do is anybody who's thought about
give me
flying a
1
drone but you're not a
second.
trained camera person
Let me go
or you
do
don't know how to
this.
compose shots, it gives you the ability of a professional creator in something that's small and easy to fly. So we basically open the market for people that never even imagined that they would be able to fly a drone.
We've just been actually showing it to our viewers as well. You can see there, but this is a drone that was
This
5
is
years
what
in the
your body
making, or you were
needs
saying
right
10
here.
years really, if you count as well the input
Let's go
from
drain these. We'll be right
Insta360
back.
as well. What's been the reception so far to it, and where are you seeing most sales?
Yeah, so actually we started shipping the units a little less than a month ago, and since then the feedback has been remarkable. People are really understanding that this is something new that they haven't seen before, and for existing drone pilots, they realize that it's a level up on what they've experienced before, which is a single lens fixed drone that was limited in where you could fly it and how you could fly it, to now being able to capture everything. And then for consumers at home, it gives you the ability to experience the world in a whole different way. So again, yes, this is 5 years of R&D and about $150 million in development. Plus, our friends at Insta360 really helped incubate this company by allowing us to use their 360 technology. So the way it works is there's a lens on the bottom of the drone, there's a lens on the top of the drone, and the software stitches both lenses together in real time. And when you put on our goggles, you're getting a fully stitched 360 video. You can look around in any direction. So like if you've ever used the VR headset with pre-recorded content on it, you get to experience that, but in real time. And the drone can be hovering in one direction. You can be looking around in any direction in the headset, independent of where the drone is moving. So there's a ton of different use cases for this drone. From a consumer standpoint, you can let me back up. Here's what I tell everybody. When you're flying a regular drone, you're flying a camera, and that's really, really cool by itself. When you're flying the anti-gravity drone, you become the camera and you become the drone, and you're soaring through the air. So as kids, we used to have 3 different types of dreams. We were either running away from something, falling, or flying. This brings you back to those childhood dreams.
I do want to ask, though, the timing of the launch is probably not what you wanted to see with the FCC ruling on restricting foreign-made drones. How is that actually impacting your business, and what changes do you think you need to make
It's
as a
only a
result?
few minutes left, so
The
let's
timing is
finish it.
interesting, but fortunate enough, the
It's been
A1
a good
is fully
prayer.
FCC
Thank you, Heavenly
compliant.
Father, for all the
It's
blessings in our
available
lives.
for
And thank you,
sales
Heavenly
in the
Father,
U.S. and
for
actually
all
in
the
over
blessings
100
in our lives.
countries
We worry
worldwide.
not about what we don't
And
have, because we're in the process of getting
repair
it.
business is strong, so if
And in
anything
that
ever
journey,
happens, you can
everything we
ship
do
it,
is
get
in
it
the
serviced. So
Amen.
there's no issues for the A1. For
Everything is
future products,
convertible,
we
so
are
I can
definitely
make
looking
space.
at all options right now, including U.S.-based manufacturing. And
So
in
you
terms
guys
of
can
our
actually
worldwide
hear
split,
me.
I would the U.S. and China performed very well for us in the first month, but Europe is not far behind. I would say it's a pretty equal split between all regions worldwide.
Free snack,
Best AI,
some mac and
control
cheese,
predator is
small,
much more powerful.
and a
Our
large
goal
mashed
was to create a
potatoes
powerful
with gravy,
agent that
because we're
lets
going
users
to add the
express their
vegetables.
creativity safely and effortlessly.
Commerce has completely transformed over the past couple of decades with same-day groceries
Make
and
sure I
next-day
get fresh.
deliveries. Automation and robotics will have an important role to play in the future. It's symbolic.
DoorDash
AI
will need to make
process
sure.
enormous amounts of digital data. When you connect that data to a physical device, you end up with a robot with embedded AI. We call that physical AI. The adoption of physical AI in robotics is a paradigm shift in the making.
And this can
So as
be
you think about anti-gravity and the markets that you target, would you say that you would be deprioritizing and de-risking from China if you're looking to maybe manufacture away from the mainland market and also to seek growth markets outside of China?
Well, it's not essentially deprioritizing China. It's coming up with a better way to sustain the business long term. China is always going to be a consumer market for us. Folks in China absolutely love the anti-gravity A1, so we're not going to veer away from that. But
green
we're
beans
also
on
going
one
to
side,
make changes to the business in order to make sure that the U.S. consumers can get the latest and greatest anti-gravity products. So all options are on the table. We also are working with our lobby groups and legal partners to explore what the boundaries are of the new term. So it's very early right now. This was just announced, and I think other companies are kind of in the same boat where we're evaluating and seeing what's possible.
Okay, yeah, you've certainly got a lot to grapple with, I guess, as a CEO in this position. But what do you think then in terms of the fundraising outlook? Because you have some, obviously, you spun out of Insta360, you've had some very high-profile backing. How much capital do you need essentially to move forward, and where are you looking to source that?
Well, actually, when VCs and private equity investors started hearing about the anti-gravity, folks are throwing money left and right at us. This is not a joke. We're oversaturated in how many requests we have to get, but our main goal is to make this a truly global brand. And we have VC money coming in from North America, from the U.S., Canada. We have VC money coming in from APAC region. So we're very open in terms of our global priorities. Long term, we're in a Series A round right now, and we've raised about $200 million at the moment, and that's to sustain the business long term and to fund our R&D efforts for future product lines.
What valuation on that?
$1 billion.
Okay.
$1 billion
You
valuation.
mentioned earlier that you're looking at targeting
How
an
many
IPO
billion-dollar
or listing in the
companies
US
can you
market.
get?
What's the thinking around that, and then what would be the timeline?
Fresh tomato.
That's our ultimate end goal. Obviously it's the company just launched and it's very early, but we're long-term thinkers, and when the company is ready, we would like to IPO in the US stock market. Again, timing too early to tell, but we'll see after a couple more generations of the product.
All right, Michael, thanks so much for joining us this morning. That was Michael Shabu there, the CEO of Anti-Gravity. Paul, I'll hand it back to you, but as we said, our coverage at CES is very much continuing, and Anti-Gravity really has been one of the major exhibitors here as well.
All right, thanks, Annabelle. Annabelle Cool is there in Las Vegas. We have more ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg.
You're watching the Asia Trade. Take a look at how Asia defense names are rallying hard. And this is following on from what we saw overnight in the US, where Trump really said that when it comes to increasing the investment in production as well as research, do that for these US defense names. Otherwise, that could mean they can't engage with share buybacks or dividend payouts. But then he followed that up with these requests, he says, for upping the defense budget. So you're seeing a reversal in the trend from what we saw earlier on this US defense names really tanking. Now Asia names picking up. He's seeking a 50% boost to the annual defense budget to $1.5 trillion, boding well for Asia defense names as well. And that's helping to buck the trend in the rest of the region. More ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg.
We've got some breaking news out of Australia. It is trade figures for the month of November. The surplus coming in a little bit weaker than expected, about 2.9 billion Aussie dollars. A bit of a contraction in exports there of 2.9%, reversing the gains that we saw back in October. Imports also slightly softer, just a gain there of 0.2%. Trade surplus, as I mentioned, they're a little bit weaker than expected. Not a great deal of change there for the Aussie dollar. Let's take a look at how commodities are performing. Meanwhile, we've seen a little bit of a pullback in copper and nickel prices as well. Perhaps a function of traders taking profits after some of the huge run-ups that we've seen in both of these commodities. Longer term, though, the demand picture for both pretty much intact. And Indonesia, which is the world's largest producer of nickel, has already flagged plans to trim back nickel production and better balance supply and demand. Crude prices, meanwhile, a little bit stronger, 56.32 for New York crude. We've had a bit of news flow in that regard as well. President Trump saying that the United States is now going to control Venezuelan oil exports indefinitely, and Chevron also in talks with the US to extend its special license, allowing it to be currently the only US major that is involved in oil production in Venezuela. Now let's get a little bit more on the longer term picture for oil. We're joined now by Vandana Hari, founder at Vanda Insights. Vandana, thanks as always for joining us. There's a few time-related narratives around the oil market at the moment. I mean, in the short term, we're back pretty much to where we were before the US operation in Venezuela. But longer term, I mean, Venezuela supplies so little at the moment, they could supply so much. But with oil prices so depressed right now, how viable is more investment in Venezuela?
Good morning, Paul. So amongst all the hurdles that are stacked up for Trump's ambition of U.S. companies tapping the 300 odd billion barrels of Venezuelan reserves, you just mentioned yet another one, which is the outlook for oil prices. And again, here we are not just talking about 26 or 27 for that matter, but longer term, because let us remember, tapping these reserves and rehabilitating the overground infrastructure that is needed to support the movement of that oil is going to take years, if not decades. So assuming that global oil demand is going to continue, growth is going to continue decelerating, which means oil prices are probably going to continue softening. You know, we may not return to $80 and $90 a barrel kind of range on a sustained basis. That will be yet another question amongst everything else, which is political stability for oil companies before deciding to make those kind of investments of billions of dollars in Venezuela.
Yeah, we do need to talk about the everything else as well, because as you mentioned, there are so many factors here. If you were an oil major like a Chevron or Conoco or Exxon, you'd have a lot of questions around security, future political stability, and of course Venezuela has form when it comes to nationalizing oil assets.
Yeah, not only that, Paul, but also I couldn't look to anybody to authoritatively be able to tell me or guarantee that kind of security and stability. So I could be talking to, of course, President Trump and the core team that is overseeing the transition in Venezuela. I could talk to the Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, but really, who has the crystal ball today to be able to guarantee me as a US major that this is exactly how things are going to play out in Caracas? How long the transition will take, who will be the new leader, how will the new government operate, how will it operate and under whose influence after Trump is gone from the White House, right? So all of these questions are definitely going to be swirling in the minds of the executives of the oil companies. And then again, let us not forget, it's billions of dollars. It's not a small investment. So again, I think we should differentiate here. If talking about just, for instance, Chevron, which is already in the country, to go in and maybe do a little bit of, modest investments and just get some things back in order to be able to exploit the current maximum production potential, that's one thing. But saying that, putting tens of billions of dollars at a minimum to tap those 300 billion barrels of reserves is absolutely another question.
Okay, so that's on the US side of things. Also worth remembering, as you well know, Vanda, how China was that big market for Venezuelan crude. Where does this leave it in terms of China procuring supplies of energy?
Yeah, so I think the rerouting and reshuffling of oil flows is probably going to be a key theme in the medium term. And one of the biggest affected parties as a result of that is definitely going to be China. So as we know, China was taking the lion's share of Venezuelan crude exports, close to 600 to 700,000 barrels per day at heavily discounted prices. So this was benefiting the small independent players in China, often known as teapots, who operate on very thin margins. They're very reliant on discounted crude from places like Venezuela, Iran, and more lately Russia as well. They are going to be on the losing side. I mean, even in the near term, we can already see the US is prohibiting or blocking ships from taking oil to China. So China has already been
Expensive
deprived
oil.
of that
Heavy
discounted
process.
oil that it has depended
And
on
the
for
loss
the
is
past at
still
least
$3,
5 to 6 years
60
since
cents more.
the first Trump terms sanctions on Venezuela. To some extent, Canada will be impacted as well. The US ends up taking a lot of the Venezuelan crude, which is my base case, at least for the foreseeable future. Canadian crude will need to be backed out and potentially seek home in Asia, again, where China is the main buyer probably, but then for China, doesn't get the extra Canadian crude at the same price as the discounted Venezuelan, probably not. So, the Chinese teapot refiners especially are looking at very further thinning of their margins.
At the same time, there's a sense that what's happened in Venezuela is setting a pretty dangerous precedent, especially if the US is going after natural resources in this manner. What is your sense of where it might potentially set its sights next?
Anybody's guess, right? So there's, of course, a couple of names which are being discussed more prominently, Greenland being one. That will hopefully not rattle the oil markets, but the other one is Iran. Not the same kind of intentions, but we do know, we have seen in the past few weeks especially, Trump amp up his rhetoric against the government in Tehran, and that is a different ballgame altogether. So if we see renewed tensions in the Gulf, in the Middle East between Israel and US on the one side and Iran on the other side, we could be in for a very, very geopolitically driven, risk premium driven oil markets going into 2026.
Which could be quite a different situation compared to last year, where that geopolitical risk premium was more or less discounted by the markets. Vanna, thank you very much. Always great to get insights from you. Vanna Hari is founder at Vanda Insights. Now, some other top global headlines we're following. Shares of home builders tumbled in the US after President Trump announced a ban on institutional investors from buying single-family homes. Blackstone, a major investor, pared some losses before closing 5% lower. The announcement is a bid to address housing affordability ahead of this year's midterm elections. Protests have erupted in Minneapolis after an immigration and customs enforcement officer shot and killed a woman in a car during a confrontation. President Trump says the officer appeared to be acting in self-defense, alleging the victim acted in a disorderly and obstructive way. The Minneapolis mayor has called on ICE to leave the city.
What they are doing is not to provide safety in America. What they are doing is causing chaos and distrust. They're ripping families apart. They're sowing chaos on our streets. And in this case, quite literally killing people.
You're looking at those live pictures out of Minneapolis. Looks like a vigil for the victim. More ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg. Let's take a look at how Asian markets are faring in the early goings. The Kospi managing to reverse a bit of a stumble at the start of the trading session. You're looking at the region's benchmark pretty flat after sort of running into a bit of a wall with this rally. That was a really bright start to the year. The Nikkei is being pulled under about 0.75%. And we are seeing geopolitics playing out. The likes of Shinetsu, this is of course a big player when it comes to some of the chip making materials that have been targeted by Beijing. Kosdaq also is managing a bit of that gain, but not by much. Now let's head back to CS in Las Vegas, where Asia tech correspondent Annabelle Jolis is with our next guest. Belle?
I wish I could pay for live sports for just one day and not the whole month. Slim lets you do that.
I wish I could finish one sentence without some man.
Any other wishful thinkers?
Did you hear me?
Introducing Passes. Get live TV for the day, week, or weekend, starting at $4.99. Slim lets you do that.
Eligible Costco members get exclusive offers on select 2025 and 2026 Cadillac Lyriq Optic and Vistic models.
Are you thinking about epoxy for your garage floor? Consider Sharp Coatings instead. Sharp Coatings are 4 times stronger than epoxy, 100% antibacterial, and last a lifetime. Over 50% of our jobs begin by removing a failed coating. It's costly and time-consuming to redo your floors every couple of years. Don't pay twice, get it done right the first time. Everyone is choosing Sharp Coatings because of our unbeatable prices and 5-star service. It's cheaper to do it right the first time.
Thanks, April. Yeah, joining us now is Alex Young. He's COO and CFO at True Your Smart. So, Alex, thanks very much for taking the time to speak with us. I think we can get started with a bigger picture question because if there's anything that's really clear out of this CS, I think is that real movement to embodied or physical AI, so the integration into devices now. But how does that actually work with True Your Smart, and what is your place in the ecosystem as well?
Yes, and thank you for having us, Anna. So truly what we offer is we're running as an AI cloud platform and open the toolkit for any type of hardware developers from all over the world who want to design any type of smart devices easily and efficiently. And so through that, we're building a developers ecosystems, connecting the manufacturers, the design houses, the engineering, and brands and distribution channels together.
So it's essentially about enabling IoT or Internet of Things and devices. So where are the companies that you're working with? Where are they from? And what are the sorts of geographies that you target? Because obviously this is really a key market for Chinese companies that are looking to get exposure to the US and other parts of the world.
Yeah, so for us, is that we're kind of like the really global footprint all over the world. So right now, we help the brands all over the world. Over 7,000 brands come from over 100 countries out there. And behind them, we manufacturers cover over 12 countries. So we're working with every single hardware manufacturer basis all over the world right now.
What's the consumer adoption look like? Because I think this is obviously a very specific audience that comes to CES and is really interested in being, I guess, on the edge of these devices. But for the everyday consumer, where are they at in terms of adoption of AI?
Yeah, so for us is that so those devices my customer built and be selling to, I found that close to 20% of the users come from the United States, around 30% come from Europe, 15% come from China, and 16% come from out of China in Asia, and 12% come from Latin America. And I still have 5% come from Africa and the Middle East. So it's quite widespread out. And it showed us that the AIoT can really help people to make their life easier. So it will be the common demand for the people life.
I was interested in your latest earnings that you had at the end of last year, that in the call it did come up a few times about this softer demand you're expecting for the fourth quarter, which I found a little surprising, just given that there's usually a seasonality factor attached to fourth quarter demand as well. So how did that actually pan out, that period, and what is your expectation for 2026?
Yeah, I think that eventually the Q4 will comply with what we expected. Will be a kind of the soft one because of the macro economy. We found that will be a lot of challenge intensity through that. But in 2026, we found that we will be promising year. The first one is that most of the companies, including my customers, right, people cannot survive in a very conservative level of operation anymore. People still, the nature is grow the business, so looking for to expand. And the second one is that looking around for the